The Association of the United States Army is pleased to welcome you to AUSA's new report webinar series. The webinar series features presentations by senior Army leaders responsible for key programs and initiatives. It also features contemporary military authors who weave together the past, present, and future story of the United States Army. Kicking off today's webinar is AUSA's Senior Fellow, CW5 Phyllis Wilson, U.S. Army retired.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Association of the United States Army's Noon Report webinar series. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We appreciate your support as partners in the defense of our nation. Today's discussion will be on warrant officer talent management initiatives approved in the last year, along with the future warrant officer study. The panel will focus on the regular Army retired to Reserve Army Directive and the progress made by each component of the Army. Joining us today is Chief Richard Knowlton, Senior Warrant Officer Advisor, Army, Regular Component, Compo 1, Talent Management Task Force, and Chief Teresa Domeier, Army National Guard Command Chief Warrant Officer, and Chief Patrick Nelligan, Army Reserve Command Chief Warrant Officer, Compo 3. For those joining us online today, please take advantage of having this distinguished panel here to ask questions. CW5 Rick Knowlton is currently serving as Senior Warrant Officer Advisor for the Army Talent Management Task Force. He has previously served as the Chief of Aviation Warrant Officer Assignments at the U.S. Army Human Resources Command and Command Chief Warrant Officer of the 1st Air Cavalry Brigade at Fort Hood, Texas. CW5 Teresa Domeier is currently serving as Command Chief Warrant Officer of the Army National Guard. In this role, CW5 Domeier advises the Director of the Army National Guard on all matters pertaining to policies, programs, and actions concerning the warrant officer cohort across the Guard. And CW5 Domeier previously served as Command Chief Warrant Officer of the Nebraska Army National Guard. CW5 Patrick Nelligan is currently serving as Command Chief Warrant Officer of the U.S. Army Reserve Command, USARC, and in this role, CW5 Nelligan advises the USARC Commanding General, headquarters staff, and subordinate elements on all matters affecting talent management, professional development, and quality of life for Army Reserve warrant officers. Chief Knowlton, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thanks, ma'am. In behalf of Brigadier General Funk from the Army Talent Management Task Force, we want to say thank you to the AUSA and thanks for this distinguished group to join me today so that we can discuss talent management, specifically about warrant officers. So what I'd like to do first before we really get into the question portion of this is just give the audience a quick update on what Army Talent Management has been doing for the last few months with some of the successes that we've had and some of the Army directives that have been approved. So the very first one I'd like to talk about was approved back in May, and that was an SF, a Special Forces branch pilot. And I want to make a note here too that even though it's focused on one branch as a start, it's really about changing a system, changing a process, changing the way that we're promoting these individuals. And so in this case, this Army directive allowed us to promote a senior NCO into a CW2 straight out of their warrant officer technical and tactical course. And so other branches are looking at that path that they carved and potentially looking to apply that same type of authorization in the future. So just for those that are into the Army directives, it was 2021-19 is the one that allowed us to make that change. The next one I'll talk about was led by Aviation Branch, and this one specifically was for aviation active duty W1s. What we found and specifically it was a holistic aviation assessment task force had researched some accidents that had happened over time with aviation, and what they had recommended is that we really take a hard look at considering providing extra developmental time for W1s in Army aviation. And so what this directive does is it actually looks at what time of their career do they actually graduate and get MOS qualified, and then starts the 24 months of time in grade at that moment forward. So what that really does is those folks that are going through an extended period of time through flight school, that's not counting against them as far as their developmental time as W1s. And what we really hope to benefit out of this is before they're tracked into the instructor pilot or maintenance pilot or safety or any of those other type of specialties, that they have that time to build that experience as a pilot, as a W1, prior to progressing forward. That started in October, and one of the concerns about implementing that would we see a difference in sessions, and so far sessions have actually gone up for aviation branch. So I think those that understand that program and its intent behind it are all in, and we're looking forward to seeing how this plays out in the future. Quickly, this isn't an Army directive, but it's certainly a project in progression right now, and one of the things that the task force was tasked with was the Warrant Officer Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Plan, or the DE&I, specifically for warrant officers. And our own Chief Dempsey has been the lead editor for that, and we're hoping to have something put together here over the next few months it's currently in draft form, but with a focus on warrant officer DE&I for the Army. That'll operationalize the Army People Strategy and specifically the DE&I Annex. So the next few, I'm saving the best for the last with the distinguished audience that I have here, but the next few things quickly I want to just briefly talk about is this future total warrant officer study that we're looking at putting together. And that includes, if you've heard me talk before or heard any of the talent management conversations, we've talked about competitive categories, looking at expanding them for precision talent management. We've talked about and studied CELCON or selective continuation management. In other words, currently CELCON is looked at as kind of a negative thing because it means that you got passed over. So we could look at these challenges individually. We could look at them as a promotions challenge, but really, what we've kind of come to realize is that if we want to truly make 10x change, we need to look bigger than the box that Title 10 puts us in. So this is where we're wanting to look at a holistic study of warrant officer promotions, which will include a study of Title 10 and one example of how we could potentially change this for the Army. And really it would be for warrant officers across not only all three cohorts, but across all of the military, would be the consideration of delegation of authority to each secretary concerned for the management of warrant officer promotions. So we are doing a few other cross-cutting efforts. One thing I want to mention just as a quick update too. So we've drafted a legislative proposal for warrant officer merit-based promotions and warrant officer opting out. The challenge we've had with that is that although the Army fully backs this legislative proposal, it has to be a DOD effort, a DOD priority for that to get through, and we're having that challenge. It's at the 11th hour. It's with the Office of Management and Budget, but we don't know yet if it's going to be supported at the DOD level to move across into the priorities that the Congress will see. So that's where that is right now. We have the support from our Army leaders, and we appreciate that, but it's still to be determined if we're going to see that in the next FY's discussion. Some other things I want to mention real quick is we are involved in the Army Talent Attribute Framework, or ATAF as it's called. That's where we're working with the Knowledge, Skills, and Behaviors, or KSBs, for warrant officers specifically, and we do that with CAC and HRC. Army Talent Management Process, or the ATAF, as you might be familiar with. This is how we actually are now aligning KSBs and aligning talents with specific jobs out there for HRC tied in with assignments. We're working with the Career Intermission Program, which includes warrant officers, which allows individuals to take time off from the Army, do some things that they might need to do in life, but still keep that connection with the Army and be able to come back leaving where you left off. We have what's called DASIS, which is the Department of the Army Career Engagement Survey, and that survey is released to all of the active duty Army at this time, and they see that survey in their birth month, and that allows for direct feedback to Army senior leaders on what the concerns, what things they like about the Army, what reasons keeps them in, what reasons they might be considering to get out, and it allows us to have true touch points at all grades and all ranks and MOSs even on what is important to those individuals. And then if you're interested in talent management in general, we do have you can just Google Army Talent Management and our site will come up. We do have a warrant officer talent management episode for podcast on there if you're interested in listening to that. And then finally, I have a grin when I'm saying this because in July, when we passed Army Directive 2021-28, which was the regular Army retired to Army Reserve or National Guard, I have not gotten more emails in the last 7, 8, 9 months than I have for this particular directive. And it's all about folks that are interested in how can they either support, how can they be a part of, or just have various generalized questions about the ability now to retire from the Army and potentially go into either the Guard or Reserve. And this obviously gets after a permeability. It allows us to look at all three compos as one big group, which is what our senior leaders have been striving to do over the years. And one thing I'll say that just to recognize that we have on average right now about 600 warrant officers that are retiring from the active duty scrolls each year. And if you just take 600 and multiply that by at least the 20 years of experience they have, that's 12,000 years of experience that we could potentially connect with jobs in the Guard or the Reserves. And I just think that's a great opportunity when we have some clearly identified shortages in both the Guard and Reserve and experience that could be connected to this. And this, to me, is what talent management is all about. So I appreciate you giving me that time to just kind of give you an update on what we've been doing over the last few months, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the audience to just really get into the discussion, and maybe some of those questions that I've seen over the last few months can be shared with the audience so that we can have this discussion. So with that, Teresa, thanks for being here with us.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you, AUSA, in inviting this panel to discuss this issue. We support, in Compo 2, we support the Army Directive 2021-28, but the Guard also has to develop Personnel Policy Operational Memos, which is a PPOM, to ensure that we give correct guidance out to the 54 states, territories, and the District of Columbia. So we've got to provide guidance with that Army Directive, so the strength managers and the warrant officer strength managers are able to bring you in and be interviewed by the CCWO, the Command Chief Warrant Officers, because there's 54 CCWOs for the states, territories, and the District of Columbia. But we welcome it, but it's going to be based on all 54 on what they need, what their vacancies are. And so I need to explain just a little on if you're coming directly from the active component, it's best to try and talk to the Reserve Officer Career Counselor so they can give you guidance. Those Reserve Officer Career Counselors, as known as the ROCs, can get all the documentation you need to go and talk to the Warrant Officer Strength Manager, and then they will make appointments with the Command Chief Warrant Officers, and then in return the Command Chief Warrant Officers will talk to the TAG. So it's kind of a team effort there, but we're here to answer all your questions for if you want to join Compo 2. And then Pat, I think he's got the Compo 3.
I do. So thank you all. Thank you, AUSA. Thank you, Phyllis, for coming out of retirement to do this today. I do find it funny, 12,000 years of experience probably represented in this room too with age. So in Compo 3, our needs are pretty specific. We're about 4,700 in our end strength needs, and we're about 37 and change currently today. That number changes weekly. We have retirements, we have people deciding they're done. But the challenge we have in Compo 3, well, we have several. First of all, we will talk to anybody, and if you want to come and find out if there's opportunities, HRC is your first step. Human Resources Command, staying good with the acronyms, Phyllis. But what you'll find out is we are precision target recruiting on the W1 and W2 level, because at the W4 and W5 level, we're not too bad on W4s, although we do have certain MOSs that are in excess. But the W5s, we have vacancies. We definitely need W3s. And the ironic thing is, that's not unique to the Army Reserve. We're hearing the active duty is having some challenges keeping them past W2 also, which coincidentally now feeds nicely into needing W3s. But you need to have the MOS. And you have to keep an open mind into where Teresa has a lot more flexibility with 54 states and territories. I'm a global force like my cousin here to my right. Where you live may not necessarily be where you drill, and where you drill may change in the course of how long you're in the Army Reserve, because we have vacancies based on unit composition and the locations. So you really have to keep an open mind, and what you're going to hear through the rest of this session as we answer questions is, if you have the skill set and you meet the criteria both medically and competency, we absolutely want to talk to you. But you have to understand certain conditions that are in place that will afford you the opportunity to come in, may not all be a perfect match. If you have a pension, which most of you, if you're retired, would, will require you dollar for dollar giving up or making decisions. And again, when you travel to another unit, we have things like lodging in kind and IDT travel to help with expenses. But I can tell you in the years I've been doing this, a lot of that's out of pocket. But when you love what you're doing, and I do, and we have a global force which puts us in places like Germany and Hawaii and Guam, that can be pricey. So there's a lot of things to consider, and I'll go into more detail during the questioning. But most important, and the very bottom line from the reserve side of the house, and I think Teresa will agree, if you've been out a while and you know, and this is straight talk from chiefs because that's what we're known for, your skills have perished. And there's a greening period. And unfortunately right now in Compo 2 and 3, we need drop-in ready soldiers. You watch the world news. We are what's the enabler to the active duty. There isn't a lot of time for train up, and frankly, you have to have an honest assessment of yourself and what we're going to expect from you, because there's going to be some sacrifice. So we are absolutely willing to talk to anybody, but a self-calibration moment would save you some disappointment very early on. Phil?
I love it. Blunt, exactly what we need to be.
Ma'am, before you start with the question, it just made me think of something I think I can add in, because it was one of the most common questions that I have, and that is about the pay. And so one of the things that we had to do that fell in right behind the Army Directive back in July was to get AR 637-1, which is the Army Compensation Entitlement Policy. It's effective 26 July, so came out on the 26th, but that actually has a chapter in it that addresses pay. And the thing that we have to work inside of is legislatively, it is still, you can't double dip. So although you will continue to get the retirement pay that you've earned, that you're compensated for, to include disability during the time of drills. In other words, if you're on a drill weekend, those pays, whichever one that you choose, because the option is to choose. Most people will probably choose the 100% pay as opposed to whatever percentage of retirement you're getting. However, it's your option for tax reasons and whatever. You choose which pay you want to receive for that period of time. That's a very common question, and I want to just people to understand that right up front.
I know this isn't one of those questions, but it's my question, and I get to ask one at least. So with regards to that, if you say I'm a retired regular Army soldier warrant, and I've now come into the Guard or Reserve, I do my drill weekend, and we all know if you're Guard or Reserve, you get paid 4 days of pay for a traditional all-day Saturday, all-day Sundays, 4 days of pay. But if you say it's just a pain in the neck to try to calculate at the end of the year that I took my drill pay, and you'll just keep your retired pay as is, you still get your 4 points,
Yep.
which is exactly what you want to have, get those points. So let's say you come in as a W3 and ultimately 5-6 years later when you leave this program,
You can't leave.
well, you
not
have to
letting you
someday. But you've accumulated all of those points, and maybe you've gone from W2 or 3 to W3 or 4.
Yes.
All of this gets recalculated. So now when you draw your retirement check after you come out
Yes.
of this, it will be higher
will
than
be.
it was
Yes,
when you
absolutely
left active duty,
correct.
right?
Yep.
Yes.
So those are some of the, plus you're also helping to support a unit within the Army, whether it's Guard, Reserve, or active duty. One other thing I have a question about, you talked, Mr. Knowlton, about Title 10.
Yes.
What we didn't talk about was Title 32 on the Guard side. Does this apply, or is this all Title 10 only?
So, yeah. So this Army directive is specific to Title 10 active duty retired regular Army warrant
Compo
officers. So it is very specific on it. And again, like other pilots, we prove that this works in this lane, then there's potential for the expansion and maybe even a change in pay, hopefully down the road. But it is very specific right now on who it applies to.
Sure, it applies to the Title 10 retiree,
Yes.
but they can serve in a Title 32 capacity, and this still will count for increased retirement
correct,
benefits
yes.
somewhere in the future.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
So one of the other things is if they have to deploy, their retirement will stop. They'll deploy, and if it's for a year, then when they come back, and if they got promoted, they recalculate everything and goes back into their retirement pay mode again. So that's another good thing to understand.
Yeah, so I would be, one thing about that, because I think we need to be careful about getting into the weeds as folks that are not the legal folks. But there is, just like similar to the retiree recall, I think there's a length of period of time that is when they make that recompensation. In other words, you might go on a 90-day deployment, or you might do something for 6 months. You won't see that change, that recalibration, that recalculation right after a 6-month period. I think it's relooked at over like a 2-year period of time, for example. But it is being captured, and it is part of that process. And the one thing that's been mentioned a couple times here, which I think is fairly relevant, is that you have a possibility of being promoted, and it would affect your retirement pay.
Which you cannot do on a retiree recall.
Right.
Whatever rank you get recalled as a
Yes.
retiree recall, that's it.
That's
But with
absolutely
this
right.
program, you actually could be promoted.
Yes.
And that's huge.
Yep.
It is.
So who do they reach out to if they're retired and they're interested in going into the Guard or Reserve? Who do they contact?
So I also talked about the Reserve Officer Career Counselor, the ROC. That's at the active duty posts. And they work hand in hand with our Warrant Officer Accessions Chief, which is CW4 Ernestine Epps. And she has a web with the Go Warrant website. There's a link to hit CW4 Epps, and she will tell you who the Warrant Officer Strength Manager is for that state, territory, or the District of Columbia. So that's a good thing that they can reach out on the Go Warrant website.
So as an example, they're a soldier, active duty soldier, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, but wants to go home to Nebraska. Then that's really who they want to talk to is the state of Nebraska Guard, as opposed to necessarily North Carolina Guard, because for the active duty soldiers, many of them have no idea that it's as different as night and day.
Yes,
if you
yes.
join the North Carolina National Guard and you think you're going to show up with your kit bag in Nebraska and say, I'm here, transfer me, it is not as easy as that, is it?
No, it is not, ma'am. No, it is not. And it's important for them to understand that the Warrant Officer Strength Manager will also give you guidance, and there's going to be a contract, and the 54, when I'm talking about the 54, I'm saying the states, the territories, and the District of Columbia, they're all going to be different. And so the Warrant Officer Strength Manager will have you do all the paperwork and collect everything, and then they will in return deal with their command chief warrant officer, and the command chief warrant officer will interview you, and then the command chief warrant officer will talk to the TAG, and actually the TAG is the final say-so.
And the TAG is typically a 2-star general in the
Yes.
state appointed by the governor.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries. I'm going to help translate these things as I talk with more and more folks out there, and they're like, they don't understand what that is. A tag is something hanging off a jacket. That's a tag. No, not the same.
The adjutant general.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, Pat, a question for you. How does somebody find out if they're even eligible?
So first I want to take a step back and hit the point you made about coming in. HRC, Human Resources Command, that's it, all encompassing. But I think it's...
But make that a little bit easier for me, because if you say HRC, I go to the website.
Site.
We've all used the website.
Right.
Where will I find it on that page?
I have no idea. I'm still in. No. So what's happening is we have a section for the Army Reserve, and the drill down on the menu will take you to, once we have this formalized in a one-stop shop, how you can go AC retiree to reserve component Army Reserve. You're not going to be on HRC, right?
No.
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, so us. But the most pressing piece to this is anybody that's still in listening to this broadcast, if there's even an inkling that you may want to continue your service before you get out, what Mr. Knowlton has done is allowed you to retire and immediately come into a reserve formation as a retiree, versus what we've traditionally tried to do, which is to get you with still life expectancy before you've retired. And the moving parts to that can be challenging. But as Ms. Domeier had mentioned, these ROCs and these RCCC sites on most active duty locations will have the vacancy listings, because we have AGR soldiers there, you have warrant officers there. They're your first point of contact if you want to find out what currently the vacancies by grade and location are. We're going to have a list we're going to update quarterly that will be out there in HRC, so you can look up. But I go back to the second tier of retirees, time and distance. How long have you been out, and how far away from the unit are you going to be? Because you really still need to come back to that question in your head. We are hiring for a specific grade at a specific location, and if you want the longevity of perhaps getting promoted and getting more retirement points, there's some sweat equity on your end to make you available, being your own, I can do this, realistically I can do this, not you need to make me whole again so I can come back in your formation. But HRC will have the list to answer your question.
Perfect. So is there an age limit on this program?
Look at us.
Look at me. I'm like, hey, can I come back in? What's the age limit?
So that will be based on what the 54 need.
So what I'm asking, can a 68-year-old person, that's the question.
So the retirement age is 60. They can extend to 62. But again, the 54 are all different. And so it's going to be based on the need and the vacancies for what you want to be for the MOS coming into for warrant officers. So it's important.
So for us, it's the same as active. It's going to be your MRD.
Your mandatory retirement date.
Yep.
Which for a lot of active regular Army soldiers in particular, they don't realize that for the Guard and Reserve, a warrant officer, whether they're a W3, W4, or a W5, our MRD, mandatory retirement date, is age 60.
Right.
So it's not like, if you're a W3, you only have until age 52,
Right.
or 56 for a W4. No, it's all the same. So that's why I think it's a little bit different. So if we've got some young folks that have retired as W2s, 3s, or 4s, even 5s, that are in their 40s and 50s, and say, boy, I really miss the camaraderie, and I have such a strong skill set that I want to continue to impart to the down-traced soldiers. This is a great program for them to continue to be involved in. But one of those things you were talking about earlier too, Pat, and you mentioned as well, Teresa, was obviously we don't need them to come in needing a fix. So there's a physical that they have to have. How long is it when they depart, when they retire from the Army, does that one hold before they need a new physical?
So for us, it's 1 year, and then you start an accessions physical if it's older than a year, or later, longer than a year.
More than 12 months old.
12
Okay.
months.
So does your retirement physical count kind of as that physical that you're talking about, Pat?
No,
Okay.
no, it doesn't.
So a flight physical, for example, if I'm an aviator that I've had that year, I can use as my flight physical for the crossover, but we have to make sure that,
Yeah.
okay, it's good to know.
So one thing, after talking to CW4 EPS, it's important to look at your options when if you're going to retire out of the AC, because once that physical is expired, you have to actually go to MEPS to get the physical that you got when you were 17, 18, 19 years old when you joined. Well, that's the kind of physical that you're going to have. And so you need to understand that if you have any disabilities, there has to be waivers. You have to go through a lot of red tape then. But you need to understand that you will have to do a Chapter 2 physical, just like you did when you first joined the Army.
So that's a quick question I have then. So let's say somebody does retire from the military and they get a 10% or 20% or even a higher disability rating through the VA.
Yes.
What happens? Are they completely, this is not their program?
No, and I can speak from experience. We have, not to say anything about Compo 3 warrant officers, but we have a lot of warrant officers that have a disability rating. And to your point earlier about the waiving of their pay, they make a decision. They get a letter each year from the VA stating, according to our records, you drilled this many days. How would you like to pay that back because you can't concurrent receipt? And they either waive their drill pay for the following year for X amount of months, or they keep their disability pay and they waive their drill pay. The point is they all have disability ratings and they still deploy and they still serve. Mm-hmm. Where we run into challenges is to Teresa's point, when you go back for a MEPS physical, which is designed to screen people from joining that may become disabled because they have pre-existing, it's a tough physical. Mm-hmm. And your disability rating is now going to be on display, and all of the things that you've claimed for disability are going to be there. It's a moment of truth, because you can't say I can lift 50 pounds if you have a disability rating that says you have a bad shoulder, for example. Mm-hmm. So I think, again, that's one of those self-calibrating moments. Mm-hmm. But if you, with your disability rating, can pass a MEPS physical, you're more than welcome to serve in our formation. But just understand, it's all out there.
Right, right. So how do you find out where the vacancies in the units are located that you might be interested in? Because honestly, I can see that, you know, when I was just a traditional drilling Army Reserve soldier, I lived in North Carolina, but as an intel soldier, my nearest one, we're in the DC area, was at Fort Meade, Maryland. And I would commute one weekend a month up to Fort Meade from North Carolina. But sometimes we could do that, what we call, you know, we could train someplace else in exchange for.
Assign and attach is also what we're looking at now.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I know.
But I found a guard unit, an MI company, very near my home in North Carolina that like once or twice a year I would do a weekend drill with them, which saved me from having to drive up, plus all of the, like you said, the lodging in kind. I did get accommodations at Fort Meade to stay there for the drill, but what a pain in the neck, especially if you have a civilian job, and many of us do, right? And even those that are retired in this program will have a civilian job. So you drove Friday afternoon after you left your civilian job to get up to Fort Meade from North Carolina. You do your drill weekend, and as soon as you can hop in a car on Sunday late afternoon, evening, drive your 5-6 hours home so you can get up and be at work at 7 a.m. the next morning to do your day job Monday through Friday. So, you know, this isn't as easy and luxurious. People think, I started out regular Army. I had not the kindest view of Guard and Reserve soldiers, but having now served for more than 30 years in the Army Reserve, both being mobilized and deploying to combat zones and doing all the things, as well as being a director of nursing as a civilian and still trying to be a stud warrant officer intel person, all at the same time. There's a lot of work, right? It's not one job. You don't put on the one uniform and that's all you're focused on, you still have all of these things to do. And I'm not trying to scare people away from it, but I think, Pat, you said it quite eloquently, a self-calibration moment and understanding if you want to continue to serve, and because we do have these huge gaps and seams in our forces in both the Guard and Reserve, and as the technical experts of the Army, we need them. And we're trying to find a way to get them in there. And I appreciate that the Talent Management Task Force took a hard look and took the time, because we know writing policy and getting it approved doesn't happen overnight. There's a lot of work involved with it. So it says, how do I find out who your strength manager is? We've gotten that one run through. Can you come in, you stay the same rank. You don't lose a rank or anything as a result of this, correct? That's important for people to know. You hold the same rank. And so if MRD, wait, somebody's archiving a question and it's covering my question that I want to ask. It says, for 30 years as a warrant officer, I assume MRD for 30 years as a warrant officer, which is often more likely than 60 years old for Compo 1, is this still a valid cutoff? Used to be you could only hold 30 years as a warrant, right?
Yeah, and I don't know if that applies to the Guard and Reserve, because I don't think it's the same, right?
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't.
So I mean, that's an option, an opening
I was
that
a
one might
warrant
have.
longer than 30 years before I retired. So yeah, it doesn't apply. You can hold those ranks, and we have for a long time in the Army Reserve, we didn't have a 2-time non-select and either CELCON or you get to go home. We had people that could hold W2 or W3 rank for more than a decade, way more than a decade. And when I started, when I was in Pat's current position back in 12 through 15, when I was looking at that, I thought, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. But I mean, you need that skill set and where they're at, but again, they didn't want to relocate. And so this is something we've just had to have that real hard conversation. And truth hurts sometimes, and we've got to be clear. We need you to serve for the needs of the Army, not for the needs of Pat Nelligan or Phyllis Wilson or Teresa Domeier. You have to be willing to serve, and if it's not calling your heart to step forward and do this, then it's not the right job for you. So if I'm retired for 1 day to 5 years or more, who's required for gathering all of the information to apply? It says if I'm retired for 1 day to 5 years.
Oh, the span of between 1 day or 5 years.
So
they can be retired up to 5 years typically to apply for this, or there's no limit?
No, there's no limit, but again, self-assessment. But a big thing is that if they're still in the AC and they go to the ROC, they can gather all the documentation for you. But if you get out, it is going to be the individual's responsibility to have all the documentation that they need. And if anything is expired, then that's what they're going to have to work with. If your security clearance, then they're going to have to go through the security officer for the 54 states, territories, and District of Columbia. So it is going to be a process, but it can be done. But the individual has to keep all documentations, OERs, everything. So that is why we're stressing to visit, the reserve officer, career counselor before you get out, so that you understand what it's going to take to keep you back in.
And if I may, to jump on that, so I gave a little bit of a gloom and doom on too far away from the formation perishable skills. But as we're seeing in our formations, and you saw when you served, their civilian acquired skills have a lot of value. So that's documentation. Yes. When you're looking at, PME, professional military education requirements for your grade, you may have civilian skills that absolutely dwarf what we need as a minimum. That's what you bring to the table. But if you're not thinking like, you have to truly sell yourself as a job interview, I think is a decent way to describe this. So 1 day to 5 days, all the documentation. Do you want to come into the reserves and the Guard? Then you need to take that on yourself.
Yeah, and that's the thing with it being a new program. It's one thing for the kiddos, I say kiddos, that are still regular Army
Right.
and are now looking to depart for a myriad of reasons,
Yeah.
family life, whatever the case may be, want to go back and be a full-time student and get a graduate degree. Who knows why they choose to leave. But that's one thing now that the program's in place. But for those that retired just 2 or 3 or 4 years ago and now they're hearing about
Yeah.
this, it's like, well, gosh, I wish I had, but now it's back on them. The onus is on them, and let's
Right.
hope that you listen to all the things the Army and your senior people always told you. Save everything, whether it's in digits or hard copy, save it. If I'm a retiree from the AGR program, is this program for me?
So again, to come back as a TPU or to come back as an AGR would be the first question.
Right.
And if they're looking to come back as a TPU, yes.
Okay.
But they're not going back in the AGR program.
TPU is the 1 weekend a month,
Yes.
not a full-time,
Yes.
just so everybody knows, because we've got M-Day over here.
Troop Program Unit, which is an acronym for the traditional 1 weekend a month battle assembly specific soldier.
And just know that when we also mention for the full-time regular Army folks, when we talk about a drill weekend being Saturdays and Sundays,
Yes.
it's not true all the time.
Correct.
It could be, they're called mutas. We know what a muta is. But so normally it's 4. We get paid basically a day's pay for Saturday morning, another day for Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon. But if we're prepping before we go out to the field or weapons qualification or whatever, we may have a Friday afternoon, a MUTA 5, right? Or a MUTA 6, or they can go all the way to 8. So when you think you're just going to do 1 weekend a month, it's a lie. It's a lie. It's a lie. I'm just going to say.
Yeah.
And especially as a leader, as a warrant officer, I don't care what rank you are as a warrant officer, if you come in through this program or otherwise, there's all the training planning, there's all the execution, there's the extra dial-ins or Zoom meetings, Teams meetings that you guys have, that we have as we're helping to run and shape our formations. And this, you want to be at the table. You have to be. The warrants have to be part of the conversation and saying, well, I don't have time. Nobody has time. You just have to, you got to make it happen.
If it's important, you'll make time.
Yeah. There's a question here, would there be a need to appear before a FedRec board? I don't even know what that means, so I'm just reading it.
That's a guard thing.
Yeah, and so that is for the Guard, and the FedRec board is for the promotions.
It's federal recognition.
And it's for when you're up for promotion or when they're coming into the Guard. The command chief warrant officer may tell you, yes, we want you to sit in front of the FedRec board just to come in. But more so likely, if you sell yourself and sell yourself strong, and that you can make a difference in the Army National Guard or the Army Reserves, then you probably won't have to do a FedRec board unless you're going to get promoted.
So I see 2 questions over here. One has to do with units overseas, and I think we've mentioned that, but let's talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then question asked about, are we using S1Net or other ways to share where the MOSs and the locations are at?
That's one of our strategies, so that's a yes. It will be coming.
That's a yes, it will be coming out.
Yeah, because, if I may, he did a great job getting it across the finish line, and he will attest, I got the phone call like 2 days later. I did it, Pat. It's on you now. So Teresa and I have been literally building the checklists and all of the documentation. So as they get asked these questions of this panel, it's an affirmative forthcoming, because we're still getting the details worked out, the final pieces.
Right. So
But
more to follow.
We're going to broadcast it everywhere because we want full disclosure.
That's wonderful. And again, you guys all use social media platforms quite a bit, whether as command chiefs or go to the Army Reserve. I mean, we can tag these out across all of these. So more to follow, but watch.
So the Warrant Officer Strength Manager, or CW4 EPS, has a Facebook site too, Facebook page that you can look up everything to, and her website will help get to the Warrant Officer Strength Managers. And for the vacancies or anything, it's different in every state. So they have to, at least contact the Warrant Officer Strength Managers to find out if there's vacancies to be filled. Like you were saying, if they wanted to join Kansas and all their aviator slots were filled, but that's where they wanted to move. Well, they don't have to live if they want to drill in Iowa, like you were saying. They could live in Kansas, but have to drive to drill once a month and then do their annual training wherever they do their training. But that's, the warrant officer strength managers will tell you where the vacancies are for the 54.
Now, Pat, you mentioned that there's about how many warrant officer billets in the Army Reserve, vice filled?
4,700.
4,700 positions out there, and we've got about 1,000 vacancies?
Yes.
How about you? Where are you sitting?
We're authorized 10,355, and right now we're at 8,700.
So you're about 1,500?
1,500 between, yeah.
So that's 2,500 vacancies that we seriously are in need of. Some of these units are bereft of, there's not a single warrant in their company or battalion formations. And these are the kind of things that we need help with. But it is a total Army solution set.
Yes.
And I think that that's really important that we figure out how we do that. So before we close up and go to my closing, Mr. Knowlton, you got anything else you want to add to?
Well, thanks, and I know we are running out of time, but this is exactly what I was hoping we could do today. I really appreciate you supporting us and doing this, and thank you, audience, for participating and sending the questions that you had in. Wasn't sure what we were going to get, but these were the kind of questions that I think it's great to share out, and you can see that this is a work in progress, and thanks a lot for the opportunity.
So before we part, I want to inform you of a few of the upcoming events. On 24 February, we'll host a noon report on understanding Russia's grand strategy, featuring Dr. Andrew Monahan, director of the Russia Research Network. On 1 March, we'll host a noon report on climate change, featuring Mr. Paul Fernan, Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Installations, Energy, and Environment in Washington, D.C. And on 8 March, we'll host Coffee with the Chief, featuring General James C. McConville, boy goodness, at the National Museum of the United States Army, Fort Belvoir, Virginia. I was going to throw a funny in there because Coffee with the Chief sounds like it should be a warrant officer. There are some really great speakers scheduled, and I hope you can join us for an upcoming webinar. For more information about any of these events or to register, please visit our website at ausa.org. And finally, we want to thank all of you who support us with your membership, because membership matters. You help us support the Army. Thank you again for attending, and have a great day.